At the class reunion, Lu Jinzhou's ex-girlfriend accidentally stained my new dress. She frantically apologized. "I'm sorry, I'll pay for it. This dress of my wife's was an auction piece from last year, sold for $1 million." Lu Jinzhou smiled while replying in a calm and collected manner. Chen Wei collapsed on the spot, her face turned deathly pale. Damn, spending $1 million on a dress. Boss Lu is really something. Some people must regret it to death. Didn't she marry a rich second generation too? Doesn't he have $1 million? More like a liability generation. Now she probably can't piece together that kind of money even if she tried. The crowd laughed excessively. I glanced complexly at this woman who had abandoned Lu Jinzhou years ago. Just as she raised her head, our eyes met. A mixture of intense embarrassment and discontent fluttered in her eyes. Earlier in the restroom, she had unexpectedly blocked my path, saying arrogantly and confidently, "Believe it or not, if I wish for it, with just a snap of my fingers, he could obediently crawl over to me like a dog." Now, in her attempt to get closer to Lu Jinzhou, she intentionally spilled red wine on me, leading to the current scene. I wasn't surprised at her actions. After all, Lu Jinzhou, now worth billions and a rising star in the tech world, frequently graces financial magazines. Had Chen Wei not married someone else, she would have been Mrs. Lu. I just felt a bit unfair for Lu Jinzhou because of her words. Lu Jinzhou took off his jacket for me, scrutinizing Chen Wei from above. "If it's a burden, perhaps you can seek help from your ex-husband in jail." She clenched her fists, her lips defiantly trembling. "I will pay it back." Lu Jinzhou just laughed. "If you can't do it, don't make promises lightly. Chen Wei, you haven't changed a bit." Even though his tone was very cold, I felt somewhat dazed. I had accompanied Lu Jinzhou from humble beginnings, through thick and thin, witnessing him both in poverty and spirited. I've never seen him like this, treating a woman so poorly in front of so many people. Hence, the laughter grew even louder. Only I noticed that despite seemingly humiliating her, his gaze never left her. Throughout our 5 years together, Lu Jinzhou rarely spoke about his past. Until 1 month ago, when we returned to his hometown to retrieve some items, we accidentally found an old wallet in his drawer. Inside was the picture of a girl with a radiant smile, very beautiful. Lu Jinzhou has always been calm, but at that moment he was lost in thoughts for a long time, a hint of loneliness and gloom visible in his eyes. Suppressing my soreness, I asked casually, "Your ex-girlfriend?" I watched him expressionless as he tore the picture into pieces and tossed it into the trash, a chill accompanied by agitation spreading within me. I left right then, marking our first fallout in the 5 years together. After taking a bath that night, Lu Jinzhou embraced me from behind, letting out a soft sigh. When the founding of my company was at its toughest, she took the core technology of my company to a rival's side and even became the boss's wife of that company. The day she was hosting her wedding, my mother went to look for her and had a car accident midway. She barely survived. She, on the other hand, went abroad with her husband the next day. Xianxia, I really hated her at that time. I silently observed his calm expression reflected on the mirror. Lu Jinzhou didn't know that I went back later. I watched him pick up Chen Wei's photo from the trash bin, eyes rimmed red, meticulously gluing it back together with adhesive. The party was soon drawing to a close. Suddenly, someone chimed in, "We're all classmates here. We should help each other out in times of difficulty. How about we organize a crowdfunding for Chen Wei?" As these words were spoken, Chen Wei's face turned pale. She helplessly looked up at Lu Jinzhou. Meanwhile, Lu Jinzhou gripped my hand, instantly applying so much pressure it felt like he intended to crush my bones. "Lu Jinzhou?" It wasn't until I reminded him with difficulty that he realized and let go of my hand. I looked at the mark left on my hand from his grip, feeling as if I'd plunged into a deep icy pit, my body freezing. The one who instigated this was laughing cheekily, stealing glances at Lu Jinzhou's reaction. Seeing that he had no opposition, the bidding soon began amidst the sounds of laughter. $5. She is the belle of the department after all. How many men's dream lover? Can we be a bit more generous here? I'd donate 20. One after another, bids were made, creating an exceptionally lively atmosphere. It was as if Chen Wei was a product being auctioned, or a helpless fish on a chopping block in a market. Chen Wei was as white as a sheet, her eyes already swollen red, but she remained silent throughout. Lu Jinzhou watched her in silence, her expressions etched with despair. In the end, when the crowd, watchful of the drama unfolding before them, handed Chen Wei donations amounting to $100, she said in a daze, "Thank you." Everyone was in disbelief. Did she actually accept it? Ha ha ha. Once a proud goddess, now living like a beggar. Ignoring the remarks, Chen Wei, with her hands holding the money, walked in front of Lu Jinzhou, her stance humble. "Here's $100, Boss Lu. Can you give me some more time for the rest of the money?" Her humility was in stark contrast to the bright and proud girl that I saw in the photo. There was a moment of silence, everyone exchanging glances. Did we go too far? She's still a girl after all. Lu Jinzhou was silent, gazing at her intently. My chest suddenly tightened, and I easily read the agitation hidden beneath his cold eyes. He had hoped for Chen Wei to be brought low, to grind her dignity underfoot. But now that the moment had arrived, he was uncomfortable watching her accept the handout with grace despite her fallen pride. Was it discomfort, or was it heartache? In the stunned moment, someone suddenly yelled out in horror, "Get out of the way! The lamp is falling!" Instinctively, I lifted my head to see the chandelier shaking precariously above us, appearing as if it was going to fall any second, and we three were directly beneath it. "Lu Jinzhou." I reached out to pull him away, only to see Lu Jinzhou abruptly lunging at Chen Wei, protecting her as they both fell to the side. There was a buzz in my head. Then someone grabbed my wrist and yanked me, causing me to stumble to the other side. Following that, the chandelier fell with a crash, spewing shards everywhere. A severe throbbing pain came from my calf. Near my ankle, a slim cut was made by a shard causing blood to spill, but it seemed as if I had gone numb to the pain. I just sat on the floor, blankly staring at the two people embracing each other. Whispers surrounded us. The moonlight outside the window and perceptive gazes from the crowd felt icy cold against my skin. Not until the man who saved me asked with concern, "Mrs. Lu, are you okay?" I saw Lu Jinzhou stiffen. He pushed Chen Wei away and came over to examine my ankle, his deep voice filled with strong regret and apology. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were behind me as well." Chen Wei also approached, her voice soft, carrying a hint of an unusual emotion. "Thank you for saving me just now." Lu Jinzhou ignored her and just stared at me. "Lianqi, I really didn't know you were under the chandelier too." I silently shook off his hand. Lu Jinzhou looked at me for a while, then without another word, scooped me up and headed towards the exit. I struggled, but his grip on my waist was firm. His voice was terrifyingly low, "Don't move. Jinzhou." Chen Wei chased after us. Lu Jinzhou had a cold expression, a tone showing reluctance to engage any further. 3 months. 1 million must be deposited into my wife's account. Chen Wei suddenly laughed, giving me a provocative glance. "Thank you for giving me a grace period. I will certainly repay you within the stipulated time." The moment we got home, Lu Jinzhou forcefully bandaged my wound. Then he closed the bedroom door, cradled my chin in his hands and kissed me. With a night's worth of pent-up frustration erupting at this moment, I tried desperately to push him away. "Cancel our wedding next Saturday? Let's break up." Lu Jinzhou restrained my movement with one hand. Why? All that filled my mind were the words his classmates had said during the unexpected incident. People's first reaction to an emergency always reveals their true feelings. The first person Lu Jinzhou saved was Chen Wei. Doesn't that mean something? Yeah, indeed. Coldness and vile words are for revenge. Care and protection are subconscious expressions of love. Like countless needles piercing my heart, the bitterness and pain spread through my veins. I asked Lu Jinzhou, "You still like her, don't you? The first person you saved was her. Because compared to me, you care about her more. I saw it last time. I saw you glue her picture back together. If you have never forgotten her, why are you with me?" No, his eyebrows furrowed as he stared at me. "That's not true. When she betrayed me, my mother indirectly lost her sanity because of her. For all these years, there hasn't been a moment where I'm not hating her. When the incident happened just now, even if it weren't her beside me, I would instinctively save anyone. Hating her is one thing, and someone's life at stake is another. But I truly didn't know you were behind me. If I knew, I would have never let you get hurt. As for giving her 3 months, it was because I saw someone recording with their phone. And about that photo, the doctor suddenly called me that day and said that past memories could stimulate my mother's brain, so I wanted to try with that photo." Lu Jinzhou held my hand. "Lianqi, you understand me, right?" Seeing that I was silent, he sighed, seemingly helpless, then slowly moved to kiss me. Kiki, I'm in love with you now. His voice had an undeniable openness to it. Don't talk about breaking up again, Kiki, it will hurt me too. In the dim light, Lu Jinzhou was clad in a high-quality black shirt with its buttons undone, revealing an alluring collarbone. His pupils were pure black with no trace of impurity. Gently playing with my hot earlobe, he asked in a low voice, "Can I?" The room's AC was set low, yet I was sweating profusely in the cold. The atmosphere was right. However, with a bang, the bedroom door was violently pushed open. "Jinzhou," I heard a cry, pulling me back from my lustful thoughts. Instinctively, I looked over. Chen Wei was standing at the door of the bedroom, her face deathly pale as she stared at us dumbfounded. In what felt like an instant, I sat up and, feeling embarrassed, quickly covered my body with a quilt. It was ridiculous. Even though I was Lu Jinzhou's, under Chen Wei's accusing gaze, I felt like I was the mistress caught in an affair. Once we were all decently dressed and gathered in the living room, Lu Jinzhou glared at Chen Wei. "What are you doing here?" Chen Wei also looked at him, biting her lip, disbelief and distress in her eyes. "I walked into the wrong room, sorry." "Get out," he coldly ordered. Lucy, Lu Jinzhou's sister, pulled Chen Wei behind her, positioning herself in front. "Brother, Chen Wei was brought here by me. Many people went to her house demanding money. I was worried for her safety, so I brought her over to stay for a while." Lu Jinzhou's face turned cold. "Lucy, do you know what you're doing?" Lucy hesitated. "This is my house too. Don't I have the right to shelter my own friend?" "Chen Wei, you don't need to be afraid. From today onwards you can stay here, no one can drive you away. In my heart you are my sister-in-law." Saying this, she provocatively glanced at me. I only felt it was laughable. The agitation within me grew even more intense. Ignoring her, I directly looked at Chen Wei. "You're afraid of people coming to your house to ask for money, but haven't you thought that you owe me $1 million too? Or are you here today to actively return the money?" I opened my payment code. "Well, you can pay me back now." "Enough." Lucy raised her hand and my phone fell to the ground with a snap. Lucy turned to look at Lu Jinzhou, her eyes complex. "Brother, I know you hate Chen Wei, but everything has a reason. Do you know back then?" Chen Wei seemed to snap back to reality suddenly, hurriedly grabbing Lucy's arm, her pleading eyes red. "Don't say it." Everyone fell silent for a moment. Until Lu Jinzhou suddenly spoke. "Back then what?" But before Lucy could say anything, Chen Wei suddenly fainted. "Brother, Wei Wei's low blood sugar level is acting up. Let her stay here tonight." I couldn't see what Lu Jinzhou was thinking. He just frowned, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. In the end, I scoffed at myself and turned around to leave. Half an hour later, Lu Jinzhou returned to the bedroom. He gripped my hand as I was packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" "Since there's a new lady in the house, I'm stepping aside." "Liangqi," I have explained, "it's impossible for Chen Wei and me." I interrupted him. "But you hesitated just now, didn't you? If she had difficult circumstances back then, can you guarantee that you won't be influenced by her?" Lu Jinzhou was very determined. "Even if she had her difficulties, the fact that she abandoned me and went off with someone else is true, and the fact that my mother ended up like this because of her is true. The harm has been caused. She no longer has the qualification to seek my forgiveness." Just now when Chen Wei woke up, I told her that she must leave first thing in the morning. The same goes for Lucy. This is our home, and since she can't accept you as her sister-in-law, she can leave with Chen Wei. "I'm sorry, my wife." Lu Jinzhou squatted down, his cool fingertips gently wiping away my tears. "I'm sorry for making you feel upset and insecure, it's my fault." In the middle of the night, I was awakened by the sound of thunder. Half awake, I turned around only to find the space next to me empty. Lu Jinzhou was gone. I nearly tore the house apart looking for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. I made several calls to him, but he didn't answer. The rain was coming down in torrents, and I sat on the sofa in a daze. Suddenly, I remembered a spot I hadn't checked. I ran to the guest room where Chen Wei was sleeping. Faint moaning sounds could be heard from inside. A loud buzz sounded in my head. I shakily tried to push the door open, only to find it had been locked from the outside. "My brother and Chen Wei are in there." I gave them the drug. I locked the door. Lucy walked over in her slippers. "They've missed too many years." For my brother's happiness, I decided to correct these mistakes. I felt my blood rush to my head. "Lucy, if anything really happens, I will call the police." I found the keys, and with a click, the moment the door was opened, my heart jumped into my throat. I am unsure whether to be relieved or not, but the scene before my eyes was not as dreadful as I had imagined. Chen Wei was curled up inside the blanket, one hand tied to the bedpost with a bedsheet, her face reddened, her hair disheveled. "Jinzhou, you don't need to save me. I know you haven't forgiven me. I don't want you to regret it." She seemed to be suppressing intense discomfort, her teary face stirring sympathy. Lu Jinzhou was standing straight beside the bed, his back towards the door. I could not see the expression on his face. "Lu Jinzhou?" When he saw me, Lu Jinzhou was taken aback. I ran up to him and realized that he was fully dressed as if nothing had happened. Shivering, I asked, "Are you all right?" Lu Jinzhou shook his head. Seeming to realize something, he looked at me and explained very seriously. "Just now, Lucy tricked me into coming here and then locked Chen Wei and me in here. But I didn't drink the spiked drink, and nothing happened between us. Which means only Chen Wei was drugged." My emotions were all over the place, and just as I was about to speak, someone grabbed my arm. "It's all because of you. If it wasn't for you, they would have reconciled long ago." Lucy lunged at me, trying to hit me. I snapped and slapped her in return. "Are you out of your mind?" Lucy looked at me in disbelief and complained to Lu Jinzhou, "Brother, she hit me. I'm your own sister." Seeing Lu Jinzhou just coldly staring at her, a hint of panic flashed in Lucy's eyes. "Xianxia, my brother doesn't love you at all. How can you be so shameless, insisting on clinging to my brother?" Her words infuriated me to the point of laughing. "Drugging your brother and his ex-girlfriend, who nearly killed your mother, and locking them in a room. You sure have a thick face." Lucy averted her gaze. "Chen Wei did not do it on purpose. She..." "Enough." Lu Jinzhou suddenly interrupted, using the most indifferent tone and expression. "No matter what her reasons are, I don't want to hear it anymore." Lucy turned pale. "Brother, you will regret it." Lu Jinzhou remained unfazed. "As for our wedding next week, it would be best if you don't attend. We wouldn't welcome you." Finally, an ambulance took Chen Wei away. As she was leaving, she whispered, "Jinzhou, whether you believe it or not, I never intended to hurt you back then." Lu Jinzhou held my hand, his face unreadable. I told Lu Jinzhou that regarding the matter of our wedding, I wanted to consider it a little longer. He didn't strongly object this time. Instead, he said earnestly, "Xianxia, no matter what, never leave me." I blocked all messages from everyone and went on a trip alone to relax. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden earthquake at the location. What I didn't expect even more was that Lu Jinzhou braved the risk of aftershocks and rushed over, looking travel-weary. I wasn't seriously hurt, but he, on the hand, had been hit by a signboard and required 6 stitches on his arm. Seeing how I was on the verge of tears, he coaxed me despite his own pain. "Luckily it's the arm. If it had been the face, I wouldn't look good at our wedding." Although the tone was playful, his expression became quite serious and firm when he mentioned our wedding. I looked at him for a long time, breathed deeply, and said, "Then you better heal soon, or else you'll have to wear bandages on our wedding day." He was startled, a light in his eyes that solely reflected me. "All right." As the wedding date approached, I was so busy that I was spinning in circles. On the day of the wedding dress fitting, Chen Wei called me. I knew about Lucy drugging the drink that day. I intentionally drank it. She said a lot more, threatening me that if I didn't give Lu Jinzhou back to her, she would commit suicide. I honestly thought she was crazy. I coldly responded, "Then you might as well die." After that, she stopped calling. Until the wedding day, someone sent me an anonymous text. "Want a bet? You two won't be able to get married today." The assured tone seemed like a plain statement of fact. Obviously, it was sent by Chen Wei. I felt an inexplicable annoyance. Not only because of this message, but also because I noticed that something was off with Lu Jinzhou today. "Groom, do you agree?" When the host asked for the 4th time, I saw Lu Jinzhou returning back to reality from his absent-minded state. After a moment of blank silence, he finally muttered, "I do." I was somewhat dazed. Did he regret it? Lu Jinzhou's phone suddenly rang. His expression slightly changed, as if he knew who was calling, but he didn't answer. The phone rang incessantly. He simply turned it off. During the ceremony, as we progressed to the recap of Sweet Past segment, the prepared photos and music strangely disappeared, and a familiar face suddenly appeared on the big screen. "Lucy." I suddenly had a bad premonition. The next second, Lucy's frantic voice echoed throughout the wedding venue. Brother, Chen Wei is missing. There was an uproar among the guests. Who is Chen Wei? She's CEO Lu's ex-girlfriend. I noticed Lu Jinzhou's obvious shock. Lucy seemed to be running while talking, somewhat out of breath. She seemed really off just now, said she was preparing a wedding gift for you, and then she disappeared. Brother, although I promised Chen Wei not to tell, I can't hold it in anymore today. You don't answer my calls, so I could only use this way to let you know the truth. Lu Jinzhou paused, his expression becoming serious. She never betrayed you. She didn't take the core technology. It was stolen by another employee from your company. She took the blame on herself intentionally. Because Chen Wei was diagnosed with leukemia back then. Lu Jinzhou was frozen in place. At that time, her ex-husband also threatened her that if she didn't marry him, he would ruin your company. For those 5 years, she didn't live in luxury. She was always abroad for treatment. Lu Jinzhou had an expression of disbelief, his face reflecting shock. Brother, she really sacrificed a lot for you. Liangqi, with her vicious mind, is not worthy of you. Do you know what she said to Chen Wei? There was a buzzing sound, and Lucy opened the recorder. A cold, malicious voice came out from it. You go die. Lu Jinzhou suddenly turned his head to look at me. He has never given me such a sharp, doubtful, questioning look before. I saw Chen Wei. She is on the roof. Brother. Lucy's voice was trembling. She's going to jump off the building. Lu Jinzhou seemed about to collapse. Lu Jinzhou, that recorder. I grabbed his arm, trying to explain for myself. Lu Jinzhou forcefully shook me off. I stumbled, and without any preparation fell flat on the floor. Lu Jinzhou? He only looked back at me once. His eyes were filled with complexity, and then he just left without looking back. Ignoring all the sympathetic and mocking eyes, I stood up, lifted my skirt, and rushed after him. A muffled thunderclap sounded, and out of nowhere it began to pour heavily from a sky that had previously been clear. In the pouring rain, Chen Wei struggled incessantly while Lu Jinzhou, his eyes reddened, clung onto her tightly from behind. They were both thoroughly soaked. You are about to get married, right? What are you doing here? In your heart, I'm just a gold digger. Lu Jinzhou, since you hate me, then I'll die in front of you both. Before she could finish screaming, Lu Jinzhou forcefully turned her around, one hand tangled in her hair, and kissed her fiercely. It was an agonizingly long 3 minutes. I watched as Lu Jinzhou held her as if he had finally found a precious treasure that had been lost and found, tenderly embracing her while savagely kissing her. I watched as Chen Wei went from initial resistance to acceptance to the point where she tilted her head back in submission. The surrounding sounds seemed to be sucked away. I almost felt suffocated, as if my throat was being strangled. I opened my mouth, tell you Jinzhou. He didn't hear me. It was as if there was an invisible barrier separating me and their world. The lead male and female, after going through hardship, finally cleared up their misunderstanding and achieved a happy ending. It was time for me to quietly exit the stage. Only after a while did Lu Jinzhou abruptly raise his head, noticing me standing beside them. His face turned pale instantly. He almost immediately pushed Chen Wei away. But when Chen Wei let out a startled cry, nearly falling, he instinctively caught her waist. I mockingly curled the corners of my mouth. Laughing as I was, tears started falling down. Lu Jinzhou strode over to me. He was always calm. I had never seen him with such a panicked expression. Even though the distance was short, he even staggered a few steps. Lu Jinzhou, congratulations. There were reasons to your ex-girlfriend abandoning you. She was dying back then and had no choice but to plot to make you hate her. You're quite happy, aren't you? Now you two can finally be together. I'm still smiling. Ki. The emotion swirled in Lu Jinzhou's eyes, his pale lips slightly trembling, as if he wanted to say a lot, but only managed to gently call my name. I took my phone out of my purse, opened a recorded call. I came here to tell you that they deliberately truncated the recordings on that recorder. This is the full version of my conversation with Chen Wei. She provoked me first, using suicide to threaten me to give you up. I dislike her, but I also can't be accused of instigating her suicide for no reason. That's right, when Chen Wei called back then, I recorded the call just to be safe. Lu Jinzhou sharply turned to look at Chen Wei. Her face changed slightly, tears gathered in her eyes. Her tearful and pitiful appearance could make anyone feel reluctant to blame her. Jinzhou, I just love you too much. Besides, you just abandoned her. ran from the wedding, and kissed me in front of her. Doesn't that already mean you've forgiven me? Her straightforward words were like a pungently sharp knife, bluntly reminding Lu Jinzhou of what he had done. Lu Jinzhou froze. His eyes began to redden, and he raised a hand wanting to touch me. Kiki, I abruptly dodged and slapped him hard. Don't touch me, it's disgusting. The air was quiet for a moment. Watching the shock, pain, and regret rising in his eyes, I felt an unusual calm and a bit dazed. Many scenes flashed in my mind. The day I first met Lu Jinzhou, when I walked in on my dad on a date with his mistress. My dad, infuriated, took the coffee on the table and tossed it at my face. It was Lu Jinzhou who was passing by, who used his body to shield me from the scalding and sticky coffee. The boss kindly gave us medicinal liquor and cotton swabs to treat the burns in the lounge. I waited outside and fell asleep. When I woke up, the restaurant was about to close. Not only had Lu Jinzhou not left, but he had also put his coat on me. You wouldn't wake up no matter how much I called. I couldn't just leave you here. Lu Jinzhou looked at his wristwatch and furrowed his brows. The weather is getting colder. Wear more next time you go out. A stranger's simple concern made my nose tingle. Looking at the heavy stain on the coat, I took out my phone to compensate him for the cost of the coat. Lu Jinzhou declined lightly. No need, it's not expensive. It took a long time for me to learn that the coat was the only one, and the most expensive haute couture he had at that time. Later, I sent my resume to his company. It was soon after the company had faced a devastating setback, and he was whining and dining clients all day, to the point of developing gastric bleeding. I suddenly realized that his craving for success was almost obsessive. It was as if he was desperate to show someone his achievements. But that day in the restaurant, he was planning to go and pull investments for the company, but he stayed until the restaurant closed for the safety of a stranger like me. Such contradiction makes one can't help but inquire. And then I fell into it deeply. I accompanied clients for drinks during the day for him, and rushed around the hospital taking care of him at night. In order to nourish his stomach, I spent several hours each day stewing soft millet porridge and lotus seed pig stomach soup. As it turned out, the day he was discharged from the hospital, I was admitted for overwork. He sat by the bed and looked at me for a long time. Do you like me? I stared back at him blankly. You're just realizing it now? Lu Jinzhou paused and smiled with his eyes down. I'm indeed quite slow. Later, he prepared a grand confession at the company and accompanied me to the mall to choose a dress I had admired for a long time. He touched the reddening corner of my eye and laughed. So easily satisfied? When the company goes public, I want to gift you a dress worth $1 million. I stood on tiptoe and gave him a peck, looking incredibly sweet, I believe you. I could not have foreseen then that the $1 million dress would be ruined by Chen Wei and become a tool for his reconciliation with her. On the first night of our cohabitation, he was wiping my tears, knowing the answer but still asking, who bullied you? In the middle of the night, I woke up to find him smoking on the balcony. In the thick dark night, his sharp eyebrows and eyes covered by fringed hair, the glowing red tip of the cigarette faded in and out. Comparing to the decisive Lu Jinzhou, he seemed vulnerable and charming at that moment. Thinking about it now, he must have been missing Chen Wei. These 5 years, I accompanied him through countless setbacks and blows, always standing by his side, and he did everything a perfect boyfriend should do for me. Yet when Chen Wei appeared, I lost everything. As I was leaving the rooftop, Lu Jinzhou grabbed my wrist, his voice hoarse, don't go. This time I didn't pull away immediately. I looked at him for a while, then smiled softly. Lu Jinzhou, we've been together for 5 years. I admire your talent and ambition, respect your perseverance and hard work, and sympathize with your experiences. I regard you and love you, and no matter what happens, I never thought about leaving you. But today I suddenly realized you are not worthy of me. These 5 years, you might have some feelings for me, but in your heart, those feelings are too shallow. They are mixed with loneliness and mutual dependence. Compared to the passionate love you share with Chen Wei, it's nothing. But let me tell you, my love is just as sincere and passionate. It's equally deserving of true-heartedness. I loved the wrong person. Lu Jinzhou's face turned a few shades paler. He moved his lips as if to argue, but seemingly unable to justify himself. He could only silently, miserably watch me. I slowly pried his hand open. My voice was cold and unfeeling. I moved out shortly and temporarily moved into a hotel. In these few days, Lu Jinzhou did not come to see me. He must have decided to get back together with Chen Wei. I thought. On the weekend, my mom sent me a message on WeChat asking me to come home. I just feel tired. 5 years ago, I gave my mom the evidence of my dad's affair. She hugged me and cried all night, deciding to divorce. Unexpectedly, my dad was brutally retaliated against by the husband of his mistress and ended up with high-level paralysis. When the mistress didn't want him, he shamelessly begged my mom, "If you don't want me either, I might as well jump off a building and die." My mom is soft-hearted and easily swayed. After my dad cried, kicked, and threatened suicide, she really agreed not to divorce. Kiki, after all, he is your dad. At that time, I cried in anger. What kind of dad is he? He has been abusing me since I was a kid, saying I'm a jinx, that because of me, he doesn't have a son. When I was 4, he and my grandma even thought about drowning me in the river. That day in the restaurant, he just threw that scalding hot coffee at my face. Did he ever consider me as his daughter? My mom bit her lip. Struggle and hesitation flashed across her face. You're not hurt now, and your dad is like this. I looked at her, feeling ridiculous and even more chilled. In this family, you can have him, but not me. You can have me, but not him. The day I moved out of the house was my birthday. My mom called Lu Jinzhou to pick me up. She timidly pleaded behind me, "You must be good to Kiki." Lu Jinzhou gave her a glance. "Of course. I will provide her with a home." His tone was slightly angry, clearly expressing his protectiveness towards me. That night, Lu Jinzhou made me a bowl of longevity noodles. Tears kept falling into the noodles. I said, "She doesn't want me anymore." Through the steaming mist, I heard him say, "I want you." I naively thought back then that Lu Jinzhou would truly give me a home. Perhaps because I didn't reply to her messages, my mom called me. She managed to say before I hung up, "I drove Liang Dong away." Liang Dong is my dad. While he was asleep, I had him tied up and sent him back to his hometown. Your grandma always wanted to have a grandchild anyway. Liang Dong is now unable to take care of himself. He's no different than a child. Why did you do that? There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. These 5 years, you never contacted me, never came home for festive occasions, and you didn't even invite me to your wedding. Kiki, I really miss you. I was there on your wedding day. When you chased out after Lu Jinzhou, I followed you. I was slightly taken aback. Lu Jinzhou didn't notice me following him, and I didn't notice her following me. Mom saw everything. They used a recorder to frame you. He abandoned you to run off with another woman on your wedding day, and he kissed her in front of you. These past few days, I've been thinking whether you would seek me out, vent to me, or simply let off some steam, but you kept it all to yourself. Her voice was now trembling with tears. You've suffered so much injustice, and yet you haven't told anyone. You can't tell anyone. Then I sadly realized, you've always been like this since you were little. Others can act coquettish in their mom's arms, but you always swallowed your bitterness. I really failed as a mother. I'm not expecting you to forgive me. I just want you to know, if you're willing to trust me once more, you can talk to me about anything in the future. I did not move to my mom's place, but I probably won't deliberately alienate her anymore. Over these years, I've saved quite a lot, plus the 10% stake in Lu Jinzhou's company. It's enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I plan to find a suitable place to buy a house and give myself a home. One day after viewing houses and just arriving at the hotel, I noticed a few people pointing and talking about me. Isn't she the Liangqi who went viral? She's pretty good looking. It seems so. Apparently she even incited the groom's ex-girlfriend to commit suicide. I heard they were a couple, broken up by her. A classic femme fatale. I immediately opened up Weibo and discovered that someone had posted a recording of the wedding incident online, along with a lengthy concocted story about me breaking them apart. The person who stole Lu Jinzhou's company's core technology was actually me. I collaborated with Chen Wei's ex-husband to split them up. Because the story was so convoluted and melodramatic, it quickly topped the trending list. The person who leaked the story was real name verified. It was Chen Wei. I didn't understand why she would do this. She had clearly gotten what she wanted. But I couldn't comprehend the thought process of a lunatic, so I chose to call the police immediately. After giving my statement and coming back, I was blocked at the hotel lobby. Having been an ordinary person for so many years, apart from winning competitions and the day the company went public, this was the first time I was surrounded by so many paparazzi and flashbulbs. A microphone was pushed into my face. Miss Liang, we heard that 5 years ago you threatened a leukemia patient, forced her to break up with her boyfriend, and after she was cured, you manipulated her into committing suicide. Is this true? Of course not. Of course it is. A familiar female voice came from the crowd. Everyone's gaze shifted towards her. It was Chen Wei. She looked much more haggard, and her clothes were wrinkled. She really wasn't in a good state. Liang Qi is nothing but a homewrecker. No matter how rich and powerful she is, I will bravely step forward today to expose her wrongdoing. She repeated the false accusations made online. After finishing, she glanced at me provocatively. Miss Liang, now that the person involved has publicly accused you, what else do you have to say? I stated calmly, accusations require evidence. Without evidence, she's just spreading rumors. Fine, then Miss Liang, do you have any evidence to prove that it wasn't you who did this? I stared at the reporter coldly, just about to open my mouth when a deep voice rang out next to me. I can prove it for her. Chen Wei's face suddenly changed. Even though I was very calm, hearing his voice was like waves crashing on me, causing a moment of dizziness. I lifted my head, meeting Lu Jinzhou's gaze. We hadn't seen each other in a month. He had lost a lot of weight, his features overly prominent, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He was staring at me, and seeing that I had no particular reaction, a hint of disappointment filled his eyes. Isn't this the groom who ran away in the video? He's Lu Jinzhou, often appears in financial news. Lu Jinzhou presented a document, his expression cold. This is the diagnosis document from when Chen Wei was diagnosed with leukemia. It's fake. I was shocked. Fake? Lu Jinzhou looked at me, eyes filled with complexity. The day you revealed the truth about the recording, I started to doubt her story. I took her diagnosis to experts for verification and it's fake. For the past month, I used my connections to contact the person she said stole the data years ago. According to the police investigation, that person did not commit any crimes. The one who stole the data was Chen Wei. I also asked her ex-husband from prison. He said that Chen Wei actively sought him out, using the core technology as a bargaining chip. He even produced a recording from that time. I subconsciously looked at Chen Wei. She was gripping her skirt tightly, looking uncomfortable and angered as her lie was exposed. It seemed that this was the truth. Facing the reporters, Lu Jinzhou said, Chen Wei never had leukemia. To secure the position as Mrs. Lu, she deceived everyone. I also took out my phone and played the complete recording again. Everyone was in an uproar. So you mean Chen Wei did nothing but create a fake diagnosis, claiming she had leukemia, using it to justify her actions? It's a stretch, but it's human nature. Lies only deceive those who choose to believe them. Lies only deceive those who choose to believe them. I silently repeated this phrase in my mind, letting out a sarcastic laugh. How fortunes change. Now the paparazzi and flashbulbs had surrounded Chen Wei again. So this was entirely self-directed and performed. Did you want to become famous? After considering it seriously, I realized according to Chen Wei's character, this was indeed possible. Since she can't become Mrs. Lu, she's seeking another path to fame as an internet celebrity to earn money. Though it looks like she might be disappointed. Even some bystanders were righteously angry, saying that she has leukemia. Isn't she afraid to actually get it? She was a gold digger when he was poor, and when he became the CEO, she unscrupulously broke up him and his fiancée. Shameless. All mistresses must die. As Chen Wei was increasingly questioned, her emotions flared. Liang Qi, what's so good about you? Obviously, I was the one who knew him first. Obviously, he liked me for so long. Why is it that you get to take my place? It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, Jinzhou and I would never have ended up like this. I showed no emotion, because you're insatiable and vain, yet only wanting to reap without sowing. You won't give anything, so you won't get anything. You ended up like this with Lu Jinzhou. You can only blame yourself. Chen Wei's face was horribly pale, but she couldn't say a word. At that moment, a police siren suddenly sounded. Chen Wei paused for a second, then immediately turned around and ran towards the main road. But she was quickly apprehended by the police. Spreading rumors, inciting cyberbullying, and stealing business secrets. She won't be out for 5 or 6 years, Lu Jinzhou said softly. I felt like laughing. The statute of limitations for prosecution of theft of business secrets is 5 years. You were reluctant to sue Chen Wei back then, but you did after 5 years. Lu Jinzhou's face paled. Don't tell me it was for my sake. What if I say it was? Hope flickered in his eyes. I curved my lips sarcastically, looking at him coldly. The moment you ran away from the wedding, you completely cut off all possibilities between us. Lu Jinzhou, you don't love me, nor do you love her. You only love yourself. Don't come looking for me anymore. It disgusts me. These days, every time I go out to view houses, I would see Lu Jinzhou standing downstairs with a large bouquet of roses. Sometimes it would be a wristwatch, a necklace, a diamond ring, a bag. I laughed. Lu Jinzhou, don't forget I have money. I can buy these things myself. Lu Jinzhou seemed not to hear, his eyes teasing. If you don't like these inanimate objects, I can give you a puppy next time. I remember last year your birthday wish was a puppy. But we were too busy, and you were afraid you couldn't take good care of it, so you never got one. These days, whenever you pass a pet store, you always stare at the Shiba Inu. Its eyes round and it smiles so gently. I'll get that one for you, alright? He chatted on, clearly smiling gently, yet he looked stubborn and obsessive. Obviously, you used to like the gifts I gave you. Don't you get it? I used to like your gifts because I loved you. Now, I don't love you anymore. Lu Jinzhou's pupils suddenly constricted, and after a few seconds, confusion filled his eyes. Liangqi, I love you. I just gave him a cold look, turned around and left. Nearly 3 months later, I finally got the property certificate of my own house. For the next few months, I was busy finding a designer, decorating, buying furniture, and by the time I really moved into the new apartment, it was already a year later. That year, Lu Jinzhou actually didn't come to see me much. He was busy with internal struggles at the company. Because I sold my shares to another shareholder who held 20% and was competing with him, I really didn't want any more connections with him. My mom came by to help me clean and gave me some updates. First, she talked about how my dad and my grandma were blaming each other back in the hometown. My dad even got into a physical fight with my grandma while in his wheelchair. It was almost deadly. Then, she told me some gossip related to Lu Jinzhou that sounded like a melodrama. Lu Jinzhou's mother regained consciousness a few days ago and revealed a huge secret. She wouldn't have been so serious back then if she hadn't been upset about something. I was intrigued. What is it? Turns out Lucy is not her biological daughter. She had a stillbirth due to complications during childbirth, and her husband brought home another child to prevent her from being devastated. But in fact, Lucy is actually the child of her husband and his mistress. And Lucy has always known about this. That is indeed dramatic. However, considering his mother's hatred for the wicked, Lucy's life at home would probably not be easy. And there's another thing, my mom hesitated. I understood. Chenwei really has leukemia? How did you know? I kept a calm look, stroking the head of the Shiba Inu. It's all over the internet. Everyone's saying to be mindful of our words, never to curse ourselves. The next time I saw Lu Jinzhou, I was walking my dog in the park downstairs, with my new boyfriend, Song Chudge. Lu Jinzhou was standing in the tree's shadows, like a silent sculpture, staring intensely at us. My Shiba Inu, Xianxia, bolted excitedly towards Lu Jinzhou as soon as he saw him, circling around him non-stop. The atmosphere immediately became awkward. Song Chudge glanced at Xianxia, his voice cool and gentle, with a lazy huskiness. Your ex-dad? Lu Jinzhou stared at him emotionlessly, his already pale face unusually white, making him look even colder. Song Chudge smiled, deliberately saying in a volume where the three of us could hear, Kiki, I'm going to buy something. We ran out at home. I knew he wanted me to talk things out with Lu Jinzhou, so I nodded. As I watched Song Chudge leave, Lu Jinzhou had already come up to me when I turned back, silently looking at me, his eyes as deep as whirlpools. You bought that puppy? I replied, yes. I used to visit that store often, so it remembers me. I know. His gaze flickered. I remember you said on your Weibo that you named it Yuan. Song Chudge said Xianxia suits it better. An eerie silence, like an impenetrable cocoon, wrapped around us. Lu Jinzhou, tall and straight, was silently staring at me. His cold gaze made me involuntarily take a few steps backward. Before I could react, Lu Jinzhou had wrapped his arm around my waist and pushed me against the wall. He gazed deeply at me, his slightly cold palm touching my cheek as if to confirm that I was really in front of him. Seeing him lean in, I quickly dodged. If you dare to do anything to me, my boyfriend will. Boyfriend? He forced out a strange cold laugh from his throat. Really your boyfriend, Kiki? I was stunned for a few seconds. I know everything. He's your friend, and he's asexual. You agreed to pretend to be his girlfriend for a month to fend off his family's marriage pressure. You know, so what? I looked at him calmly. Whether I have a boyfriend or not, it has nothing to do with you. Isn't it? How can it not concern me, Xianxia? I love you. I don't love you. Lu Jinzhou's eyes darkened, his eyelashes trembling slightly, then he suddenly changed the subject. Last year you deliberately sold your shares to Zhizhi in order to give him the capital to stand up to me. Guess who won between me and Zhizhi? Seeming not to need my answer, he laughed lightly. You won. I looked at him in disbelief. Xianxia, I want to transfer all my shares and assets to you. He stared at me intensely, his black pupils seeming to brew a storm. This way I will be penniless. Can you take pity on me? Stop being angry. Have you gone mad? Just assume I have. Lu Jinzhou pinched my chin, about to kiss me. I struggled with all my strength, raising my hand to slap him. My sharp nails scratched across his cold white face, leaving gashes. Lu Jinzhou was silent for a while, then laughed calmly. Feel better? Do you want me to slap you a few more times? I was definitely affected. A wave of irritation rose uncontrollably in my heart. Lu Jinzhou, is this amusing to you? Lu Jinzhou quietly watched me for a while, about to touch my hand, but I recoiled and hid my hands behind my back before he could touch me. His hand fell through the air and he didn't immediately retract it. So now whenever I touch you, you feel sick, right? Seeing that I didn't deny it, his eyes reddened. Xianxia, why did we end up like this? I shook my head, slowly pushing him away as if I wanted to push him out of my world. Kiki, can you not leave me? It's too late. Lu Jinzhou, you don't love me, you're just unwilling to accept it. That's not true. Lu Jinzhou's eyes reddened faintly, filled with bottomless sadness. How can it only be reluctance? Liki, you're the kindest to me in the whole world. I never told you, but I've always known that my dad has a woman on the side. My mom just turned a blind eye to it because I look so much like my dad. She never liked me. After she had Lucy, she devoted all her attention to her. When we were kids, she took us on a road trip, and when Lucy said she was hungry, she hurriedly took her and left. I was locked in the sealed car for 2 whole hours. If it wasn't for a passerby who noticed, I might have suffocated to death. The day I met you, I felt like I was looking at myself as a kid, walking in on my father's affair. But you're stronger and braver than me. I didn't dare to disturb the surface peace of the family that was actually precarious. Later, when I took you away, saying I'd give you a home, I was serious. You always wanted a home, so did I. In our hardest times, all the company's funds were trapped. We went to Beijing to find investment. We couldn't afford a hotel, so we found a 24-hour McDonald's. You ordered a pack of fries. Then you lay on my lap and told me that you're allergic to potatoes, feeding all the fries to me. I later found out that that's your favorite food. To keep up this lie, you didn't eat potatoes for almost a year until I came back from a business trip early and saw you had cooked yourself a table full of potato dishes. You probably don't know how cute you looked, red-faced and flustered. As the years went by, the longer I was with you, the more I loved you. He paused, pain and regret in his eyes. As for Chen Wei, I felt more of an unwillingness to be abandoned and the spite of being betrayed. On the day of the wedding, I didn't know what came over me, hearing her reasons, hearing that she wanted to kill herself, hearing that you were the one who instigated it. I regretted it as soon as I saw you on the roof that day, and have been regretting it every moment since then. I don't know what I can do to make you forgive me. Kiki, I'm sorry. I really am. You only know how to say sorry. I stared at the dark ground through blurred vision. My head was a mess and my jumping heart ached. Is it so hard to make it right? Kiki. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, but couldn't stop the tears from gushing out. Lu Jinzhou, it's no use. At the party, you publicly insulted Chen Wei, but your eyes never left her. You kept saying you hate her, but when danger struck, she was the first one you saved. Later, you explained a lot to me. Okay, because I love you, because you're the only family I have, so I chose to trust you one more time. All along, I have been looking forward to and clear about our future. I wanted to marry you, to have children with you, to build a family that belongs only to us. But back then, you should have seen that I was becoming uncertain about this marriage, so you promised me that even if Chen Wei had her difficulties, you wouldn't waver. But what happened afterward, Lu Jinzhou? I looked at Lu Jinzhou, filled with spite. All I saw was his guilt, remorse, frustration, and the inability to change the past. But what good does that do? The past can't be changed. The hurt can't be taken back. The grievances of the past few days finally exploded at this moment. You ran away on our wedding day. She didn't even show up. It was just a few words from someone else, and you left me for her. That recorder, we've been together for 5 years. Have you ever trusted me? Do you know how you looked at me then? You didn't even give me an explanation. You just judged me. And then, you didn't even notice me following you, kissing Chen Wei in the heavy rain. You said that Chen Wei deceived you. Lies only deceive those who choose to believe them. In the deepest part of your heart, you must have been hoping that Chen Wei really had her troubles. So how can I believe that you love me? Tears flooded my eyes as I murmured, Lu Jinzhou, in the 5 years that I've truly loved you, I've never been able to be sure that you love me. So now that I don't love you, how can I believe that you love me? Now every time I see you, I'm reminded of your suspicious questioning gaze, reminded of your running away on our wedding day, reminded of you kissing Chen Wei in front of me. These images linger in my mind, reminding me over and over again of how you betrayed me while saying that you loved me. Lu Jinzhou's eyes were red, tears silently falling as he looked at me in sorrow. After such an intense release, I just stood there dumbfounded. Finally, I said calmly to him, Lu Jinzhou, let's set each other free. Forget me. If you meet another great girl in the future, there's only one thing you need to do: forget me. Don't make her go through what I did. If I meet a great person in the future, I'll forget you too. Lu Jinzhou, you don't have to give me any shares. Let's just pretend we never knew each other. Let's never meet again. A long time later, so long that I thought he wouldn't speak again, Lu Jinzhou finally replied in a low voice. The company was also built up by you. I will still give you that 10% of the shares. If I could, I would really like if there was a drug in the world that could induce amnesia to keep our memories stopped at the day before our wedding. We were so close to getting married. There wasn't a ripple in my heart. I didn't look back at him. I just turned around and left. In the gentle moonlight, in the gap of the bustling crowd, in the moment of shared laughter, in every moment filled with love. Lu Jinzhou and I have said I love you to each other many times, considered each other as support and redemption. My love then was sincere and passionate, wholehearted. As for him, I don't know. Perhaps he loved me, or perhaps he did not. None of this matters now. I will live my own life and be my own hero.